As it has been with every COP that I've attended, it seems that the last day or two gets a little bit hurried and hassled. This has not been an exception this time. We have some issues that are still very much hot on the discussion table. But I think that there is also a confidence that we will be able to come up with something that we can go home and proudly wave, unlike some other meetings that we've attended before. This meeting also is dealing with some of the more difficult issues of the UNFCCC, including loss and damage and the ambitions for post-2020, which we want to have people committed to before 2015. Um, there are issues as to exactly how that process will take place, if there is enough sunshine on it, and how long that sunshine is going to be on it, so that when the nations make their predetermined commitments, that there is a chance for those of us who are not part of that internal national decision process can in fact weigh in on it and how it affects us. So those are some of the finer points that need to be agreed to in the next few hours. People have been working very hard into the night to try and deal with that. I think it's close enough. I mean, we have people asking questions about whether this agreement will kick in June or will it kick in December, no longer whether it will kick in at all. So it's a lot more uplifting, but still a lot of work to do.
The issue of loss and damage is acute for many small island states. We're actually surrounded by a number of pictures from the UN's Rio Conventions calendar, which the theme next year is small island states, and I think it illustrates some of the stresses and strains that countries like the Marshall Islands, which you represent, face. How important is it to have for you to have a sort of separate mechanism focusing on loss and damage? Can you explain perhaps why this is so critical?
Well, AOSIS is pushing for a separate mechanism, as you know. It feels that it might get drowned if the issue was raised under the umbrella of the Adaptation Committee, which is a real fear. We have also an experience of setting up mechanisms of this sort in the past. In the Marshalls, we did it with the Nuclear Claims Tribunal. And as of this day, as you know, it's still an outstanding issue. It's that it has not been able to, it has adjudicated, but not had been able to pay off its claims. We think that if there is a mechanism, it has to be one that the main contributors and not just the claimants can agree to, because you cannot just claim empty space. There's a lot of vacuum in the room, but people expect you to sail in a vacuum. That does not work either. So we need to bring, and we're going to struggle as hard as we can as a negotiator from the small island groups to try and bring the parties together. But it's still a very difficult issue. There are, and I think they're legitimate concerns. What do you do with problems that are raised in the smaller island countries prior to, during, and after extraordinary weather or climate change events? How much do you prepare them for it? What kind of climate resiliency and climate proofing we can be involved in that will lessen the threat of vulnerability to climate change? I think that takes away the fear of dealing with loss and damage. If communities and provinces and outer islands that are more susceptible to climate change events are more prepared, not just for the event itself, but for what happens after the event, then we're okay. But there are also effects of climate change over which we have totally no control, over which we cannot be prepared. For example, if the water keeps rising, all the typhoon-proof buildings that are on 6 foot above the sea level are going to be useless, in time. So there needs to be another look at that further down the line. What do you do in the immediate for the protection? What do you do with cases where you don't really have control over? It's sort of the acid rain question. Of course, liability and compensation are red line issues for some of our bigger development partners. So we have to be careful we don't go over that, because you can easily spook some of our partners in negotiations like this. But it's something that must be dealt with, and we're not going to give up just because of some firewalls thrown up against it here and there.
One of the biggest, I guess one country that's been vehemently opposed to loss and damage, it seems, at this talks. We're led to believe by some of the EU countries have had some fearsome arguments with them, is Australia. Are you planning to invite Tony Abbott to the Marshall Islands to see how climate change is actually a reality and is affecting countries that have been described by Australia in the past as their little brothers?
Tony Abbott, our Prime Minister, is welcome to visit the Marshalls anytime, 24/7. We will make, immediate preparations for a visit from Tony Abbott anytime. I have extended an invitation to Julie Bishop, his Foreign Minister, to come and visit the Marshalls, and she has promised that she will. We have not gotten around to actually making that visit a reality, but we have been disappointed with some of the rhetoric that has come up, some of the anti-climate change rhetoric that has come out of Australia. It has not been helpful. It's poorly timed. It's somewhat akin to the cabinet shuffling that we've encountered arriving in Warsaw. But it does not take away in any shape or form from the importance of Australia to the Pacific balance, and for its call to leadership as a big Pacific country. We hope that they can soften somewhat their stance on climate change, which is at this point in time not helpful to any of this effort. We are also very disappointed with some of what we've heard the Japanese are saying, because Japanese, in our view, as one of the cutting-edge technological powers of the world, should be a climate change leader, and it should, country after which the Kyoto Protocol is named. They should maintain that position, and they should not appear to be backsliding or going back on promises that are necessary to keep our 2-degree goal a reality.
You, in your position as Minister at the Marshall Islands, led a meeting earlier this year, a few months ago, of which came the Maduro Declaration on Climate Change. It was signed by senior ministers all around the world. How do you intend to use that, and how can that help inform what happens in these talks, not necessarily today, but over the next 6 months leading up to the Ban Ki-moon summit?
As you know, we presented at the General Assembly the Maduro Declaration to the Secretary General as the Pacific's gift to the United Nations. It is our humble effort to refocus, to bring the players together and say, hey, this has kind of gone stale. Let's renew the spirit of commitment to do our part to combat climate change. We have been very, very proud and happy with what the reaction has been thus far. The EU, the United States itself is committed to it. We're getting, for example, the state of Hawaii is the first subnational entity to sign on. And as you know, recently President Obama just appointed our good friend, Governor Abercrombie, to be his climate change man on the climate change committee. And Governor Abercrombie immediately picked up the Maduro Declaration as his first document to throw into the pool. So it's for us a significant milestone, but it also indicates that the Pacific Islands themselves, being vulnerable, are not going to just sit there, wait for the tide to come in. We're going to do our part to be leaders in this as well. We can speak with authority because we have a existential climate change issue. Tuvalu's speech yesterday at the plenary was very moving. The Prime Minister minces no words when he addresses this issue. We're very proud of that. But this is the kind of Pacific leadership we want to cultivate forward in the context of the climate change talks.